At a time when the Indian Olympic Association should in fact be focusing on the fact that, well, the Olympics are now just a few months away and that every effort should be made in maximizing the potential that India would have when it comes to, let's say, getting the most medals, what the IOA is instead dealing with at this point in time is infighting, a civil war of sorts, and something that threatens to, let's say, take the focus away from where it matters the most, the athletes. That is, of course, because as there have been rumblings that the IOA president PT Usha has been dealing with infighting from members who are supposed to be actually reporting to her, but who have now ended up going in a bit of a rebellious situation to the point where Usha has actually had to send out a letter to these members reminding them that the actions that they are partaking in are, let's say, things that are above and beyond their mandate, and that they should not necessarily be doing this at this point in time, especially when you realize that, truth be told, the Olympics is so close that athletes cannot be affording to have any sort of distraction. You've already seen distractions take place in other sports. I mean, you've had the wrestling issues go on for so long that a lot of wrestlers were themselves confused when giving, let's say, the trials, whether they should be studying for the WFI trials or the ad hoc committee trials. And now this is even worse because this encapsulates all Olympic athletes who could be potentially affected if things were to go south. But what exactly is the situation, and why is it that PT Usha has had to reach the point where she had to issue that sort of a statement to the people who were under her? Well, let's take a look at that exactly and start off with the fact that the Executive Council, who is of course meant to be reporting to PT Usha and actually only taking out certain things, are now very much at odds. So there is a civil war of sorts that is going on within the IOA. And the main catalyst, let's say, there are two major things that came about. One was, of course, that the EC ended up firing someone, in this case Ajay Narang, who was an executive assistant to the president. So she had hired Ajay Narang, and the EC ended up firing him. And not just him, there were others as well who ended up meeting a similar fate. And not just that, they then ended up putting out notices in the IOA premises saying that unauthorized personnel should not be entering the offices, which is a clear and obvious indication that, listen, these people who we fired, they should not be entering. And in fact, it's reached a point where in a letter, PT Usha said that the EC is trying to sideline her and that this is something that needs to be stopped because, well, again, it's an Olympic year and the Olympics are very, very close. In fact, we'll take a look at a couple of things she mentions in that letter. One of them is where she mentions the fact, and I'm quoting from the letter here, she said that I'm left with no option but to remind you that day-to-day administrative functions, including hiring and firing of staff, is not the job of the Executive Council. And this in itself addresses the main issue directly here, because again, one of the things that caused that was, of course, the firing of Ajay Narang, and she said this is something that is a decision that has been taken just like that. It's arbitrary. It is not within your remit to be firing and hiring anyone. Those kind of administrative functions do not come under the remit of the Executive Council. Even more so, she then adds, of course, this is, her reminding them that, listen, this is not your place. But there is also an appeal, let's say, to try and quell things before it really gets too far. Because she says that I yet again implore you to start working as a team for the betterment of the athletes and the Olympic movement in India. Now, this in itself is pretty stinging because not only is she reminding them, but as she adds in the beginning of that line, I yet again implore you, which means that this is an issue that has come up in the past, and at this point the situation is reaching a tipping point of sorts, which is why it's led to her taking this kind of an action, which is that to send that letter out. And it is really shameful that something like this is happening at such a point, because again, the story is a developing one. It's something that where more details will eventually end up coming out. But the real losers here are the athletes, the one who put in all of the effort year in, year out to ensure that they are in the best position to try and compete for medals, yet more often than not potentially get undone by silly fights like this because certain Executive Council members who are trying to, let's say, get a little too big for their boots are trying to rebel against the president of the IOA and potentially sideline someone whose main job at this point would be to look after the athletes and ensure that everything as far as Olympic preparation is concerned is flawless. Instead, she's dealing with a situation which is an in-house fight, or which can be at best described as an in-house fight, and that was something that is wholly unnecessary. And truth be told, it's something that they could be doing without. Already, planning for the Olympics, you're seeing a lot of noises from not just the government but also members of the IOA that you're trying to kind of regenerate, let's say, the sporting process, try and ensure that you make these federations and the way things are run more athlete friendly, and stuff like this happening will just undermine those efforts, because it just goes to show you that the more things change, the more they will end up staying the same. I mean, the AIFF is another good example, and it's interesting I mentioned the AIFF because, of course, the president of the AIFF also happens to be one of the members of that executive council. So it is, in fact, let's say, a situation where there is a fair bit of mess, and hopefully the mess is sorted out, because again, as I said, if it isn't, the biggest losers in this case will be the athletes who will be entering the biggest sporting event of the world, potentially with a cloud like this hanging over their heads. But what are your thoughts on the entire matter? You can let us know that in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, tap that bell, follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. Don't forget to download the SportsTak app, and if you're already on the channel, go ahead, check out some other videos we've done as well. For now, from my side, it is goodbye.